Chapter 7, Lesson 2. So in this video we're going to be talking about development and testing. So we're skipping the design stage for now. We're probably going to come back to that stage a little bit later. So the third stage is what we're going to discuss in this video. So let's go through these slides. The third stage, development and testing. So remember in the previous video we saw the 6 steps. So the analysis stage was where we collected information about how the system works. The next stage would be to design the new system, but we're going to come back to that step hopefully later on. But now the third stage, development and testing. So how we develop our system and how we test it out. So that is the stage we're going to discuss in this video. So just to talk about this stage briefly, next, once the system has been designed, it needs to be made or developed. Once developed, it must be tested to see if it works. Okay, so that is the third stage, what we are going to be looking at. Describe the validations: presence, length, range, limit, format, data type, and consistency check. Give examples. Okay, so when a systems analyst basically designs a new system. So if you imagine that we're dealing with a library, for example, that only deals with paper, a paper-based library. So all the records of the people that come in to borrow books and any information kept by the library, imagine that they only keep it in paper form. So a systems analyst might recommend that that library starts using computers to record information. So the analyst could then design software for the library to, for example, enter people's information, the books that they take out and things like that. So when they design this new form where they can enter this information when people take out books, things like that, they're going to have validation rules in those programs or forms, etc., that just make sure that the information being entered is correct. So if you've ever used something like Gmail, for example, when you try to log into Gmail, an example of a validation rule, if you ever had to make a password for your Gmail account, you may have noticed that sometimes it says that the password that you make is too short. That, for example, is a validation rule. That is a length check. It's checking that the password is an appropriate amount of characters. So just think of forms. When you're entering information in a form online, just try and visualize these validation checks being used in those forms. So the first one is a presence check. So what this does is it checks that data has been entered and not missed out. So if you imagine trying to log into your Gmail, if you don't type in your Gmail or email when you trying to log into it, it might say please enter your email that you want to log into. That is a presence check. It makes sure that the data is there that is needed. Length check, so as you discussed, but let's do it. So checks that the correct number of characters has been entered. So an example here is if you have a date field that's usually 8 digits, so you've got DD/MM/YYYY, so you've got the slashes in between. They must enter all 8 or the system will reject it. Okay, so that's an example of a length check. A range check, performed on numbers to check they are within certain ranges. So if you enter a number into a form, an example here is a person's age, it should be in the range of greater than 0 and less than 120. So your age should be between these two values. Anything over it, it might give an error saying that your age is outside the acceptable value. So if you enter -5, it will come back with an error, for example. Limit check, performed on numbers to make sure the data is not above or below a specified limit. So a learner's driver's age must be greater than or equal to 17, so you must be 17 or older for you to be able to drive, for example, in this country. So limit and range check are quite similar, but range check has 2 conditions, whereas a limit check just has 1. A format check, this makes sure that data is in a specific format. So for example, dates, when you enter a date, It should usually be in the form dd/mm/YYYY. If you enter information not in that form, it could give you an error. It's a format check. Data type check. Checks that data entered does not contain invalid characters. So for example, pure number fields, distance, temperature, etc. should not allow for text to be entered. So say, what is the temperature? For example, you might enter, for example, like 22 degrees. But if you type in text, like someone's name, like John, that should not be accepted in that situation. Data type check. Consistency check. Make sure that the data in one field is consistent with data in another field. So if you're filling out a form and you say your gender is male, but then in the title section you put Mrs., it's then going to see there's a clash. If it's male, it should be Mr. Give an example of an error message that would appear if a gender other than male or female would be entered into a system. So this is an example of a database. So if you make a field such as gender and have the validation rule M or F, so you don't exactly have to know this offhand, that is male or female as the only acceptable data for this field, then a user enters any other value such as G in the image seen, so they enter G into this field, then an error message may appear as shown. Please enter either F or M. So this is an example of an error message that would appear if you type in an incorrect value. It is important to test the software for the new system. Name 3 reasons why this must be done. So once you've developed the software to be used in the business or system, so for example for the library, if we made a program or form system for the library, we have to test that program to make sure it works, for example. So these are 3 reasons. The software must meet the client's requirements. It's the first reason. Software we must make sure it doesn't crash under certain conditions. And we're going to make sure the bugs are taken out of the software. So these are 3 reasons that the software needs to be tested before you actually implement it into your business. Why would software be often developed in modular form? Okay, so it allows the software to be broken into smaller parts known as modules. So that's what they mean by modular form. It's broken down into smaller parts, which is made by different programmers and then tested to see if it works properly. Any problems that may occur can then be corrected and tested again. So different parts of the program are developed by different programmers, and in the end it comes together as one program. So when the modules are all completed, the system entire must be tested, with all modules working together. This must be done as there might be issues when all the modules come together. It is a time-consuming process, but it is needed to make sure that the system works correctly. It leads to improved input and output methods, file, database structures, validation and verification methods, etc. So pretty much it is software. It allows software to be broken down into different parts made by different programmers, and then they can be tested to see if it works correctly, and any problems they can correct it and test it again. But all those modules come together in the end to work as that single program. What would be included in a good test plan? So if you want to test your software or test your system, what is a good test plan? So a good test plan should be created for every system module and include a list of tests that are to be performed, the data to be used in the test, the type of test, so normal, extreme, abnormal, live, so we'll discuss this in the next slide, the expected outcome of the test, what do you think is going to happen when you type in this type of information, and the actual outcome of the test, so what you think will happen as opposed to what actually happens when you test this type of data. That all has to be recorded. So we're going to see an example of this in the next slide. What are the 4 types of test data? Describe each with an example. So here's the situation. Imagine we were testing a system module, text box, to make sure that it will only accept entries of numbers between 1 and 5. The test data would look like the example in the table below. So just imagine we're working with a text box where you've got to enter a number, and we want only the numbers 1 and 5 to be entered in this text box. in some form in the software. So you have three types of test data here. We have an extra one called live data, but the main ones that we're going to be looking at are normal, extreme, and abnormal. So normal data, that is data which is to be accepted and pass the test without any problems. So data that would be accepted in this type of situation are the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Those should be accepted in our form. Extreme data, that's data on the border of what the system will accept, or the highest and lowest value that we can accept. So between 1 and 5, the lowest value would be 1, and the highest would be 5. Those are extreme data. Abnormal data, that's data outside the range that we accept. So we accept information from 1 to 5, so anything outside of this would be rejected. That's abnormal data. So like -2 or 10, that's outside this range. That's abnormal data. And live data, that's just data that is actually used in the customer's company. So for example, once installed into the customer's workplace, all modules would be tested with real life data that the company actually uses. Give an example of a test plan for a system that must accept values from 17 to 70. So we could have something like this. If you have a text box that it accepts only these values in this range, so anything between these two would be normal. So for example, 20, 45, 59, that's information between these two values, that's normal data. 17 and 70, however, although it's normal, this is a specific or special type of name. They are the highest and the lowest values, so those are extreme data. 30, that is text, that's not even a number, so that's outside of this range. The range is in number form, this is in text form, so that's abnormal. 16 is outside this range, 71 and -10, these are all outside the range of 17 and 70, so we would classify that as abnormal data. So again, just think of it like you're typing in a text box, some values, I don't know what the question would be, so you know, it could be anything, like what is your age at the moment at a company or business. Maybe they only accept people between these two ages, and if you type anything outside these ranges, it's abnormal, and each different number has a different type, normal, extreme, or abnormal. Okay, cool. I hope that made a bit of sense. That's another lesson. Let me know if you have any questions.